Hey, what's going on to all my WandaVision MCU fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of WandaVision, episode 5, which was titled On a Very Special Episode, and this was no doubt a very special episode, and we're breaking it all down. We're talking spoilers, Easter eggs, you name it. It's going to be such a great discussion, and I'm so excited to be here. But before we dive into the conversation, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which you can find all those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. It would mean a lot to me if you all can like and share this review. It really helps out the channel, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments below, let's discuss this episode. Let's have a great discussion about your pros, your cons, your thoughts, your theories. We're talking Evan Peters as Quicksilver. Is it the Quicksilver we know from the X-Men universe or someone else entirely? Oh yeah, we're going to be breaking it all down. I want to know you guys' thoughts in the comments below. So before I get into the recap, the breakdown, and my overall thoughts, just a quick little reminder, just a little plug here. As you all may or may not know, but every single Saturday, we do have a live WandaVision MCU recap show, and I'm happy to announce our special guest for tomorrow's episode with myself and my amazing co-hosts, Amanda and Chris. And the special guest will be Austin Burke, KB, and Ankit. So you're going to want to tune in tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Time, February 6th. We're going to be breaking down this episode even more in depth, getting their opinions, their thoughts, their theories. It's going to be a great time. And I want to see you all there. I want to see you in the live chat having a great discussion about this episode. And of course, all the MCU news that we got for the week. So again, tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central Time. See you there live. So with that out of the way, let's get into the breakdown, the recap. First thing I want to note is this was technically the longest episode of WandaVision thus far. It was labeled as 41 minutes, minus 6 minutes of credits, about 34 minutes, but still no less. We got a lot in this episode and so much to break down. And it's also important to note that this is the 80s now, right? So we see this episode kind of paying homage to shows like Full House, Family Matters, Growing Pains, all shows I loved and watched on repeat constantly, and I love all the little Easter eggs, and we'll talk about that intro that we got in this episode. But into the actual first scene of this episode, it opens with Billy and Tommy just crying their head off. Wanda's kind of, stressing out about these kids. Vision seems to be a little bit more calm because we know he's a computer. He doesn't really stress out and have high emotions, even though he gets very emotional towards the end of this episode. But we see Wanda attempting to kind of do a shortcut of having the kids stop crying. She tries to use her magic on Wiccan and Speed, Tommy and Billy, but it's not seeming to work. It seems like Tommy and Billy have their own abilities. They want to kind of grow at their own speed. They can control their own power. If you all, I mentioned it a couple weeks ago in regards to breaking down who Tommy and Wiccan are. Wiccan's essentially another version of Wanda, so he could do his own little magical power. So it's very interesting that she wasn't able to use that to her advantage. In comes Auntie Agnes. As she kind of mentioned, she has a couple tricks up her sleeve. Again, this show is just throwing in these little digs and these little details about tricks up her sleeve. Agatha Harkness. Either way, we move forward. And one thing I definitely want to note about this episode was, yes, they're in costumes, and I know people criticize superhero comic book, all the stuff, the movies and all that. I'm a big fan of comics. I'm a big fan of this content, movies, DC, MCU, all that stuff. But people don't really appreciate the acting that's going on in these performances. They're not just dressed up in suits and costumes. They're actually giving us a good performance. And this is one of them here. That awkward moment where let's call her Agatha. Let's just call her Agatha at this point. But Agnes, she realizes when she says that she wants to take care of the kids and babysit. And Vision kind of says, no, I don't think we really want you to do that. It's going against Wanda's authority. And we see Agnes being like, Wanda, you need to go ahead and check Vision because this is your reality. This is your world. I play by your rules, or so we think. But I really kind of like that moment because, again, the acting of them playing like the awkward, like, oh, should we take it from the top? And like seeing Paul Bettany like, what did she just say? I just thought that scene was just so well played. And again, the acting to me across the board has been really great. And again, just the Vision realizing the strangeness of the situation. And as we've gone further into the decades, he's starting to realize how strange and how different things are. And I keep saying strange because it's, again, tied to Doctor Strange, but no less, again, I thought that was a really good awkward moment. Cut to Vision even calling Wanda over to the side to kind of discuss this awkward situation at hand. And we even hear Agnes mention yet again, Ralph can't tame me, which is might be considered a throwaway line, but I still think the whole idea, and it's not just my theory, it's everyone's theory, that she is working for Mephisto and Ralph can't tame me. there is some control that I would, assuming a Mephisto or Nightmare or someone even greater or more threatening is controlling Agnes, but she has a kind of her mind of her own. She's kind of warping the situation of her own and kind of handling the situation the way she sees fit. And we'll talk about Agnes and why she's around certain moments, but no less, Vision just kind of asking, did you not just see what I just see? Again, realizing how strange things are. And then in the blink of an eye, we see Tommy and Billy go from infant babies to 5-year-olds. They grow up, they age up very quickly. And I want you all to notice that every time they aged up in this episode, minus when we talk about Sparky dying, Agnes was in the room, again, controlling the situation, using her magical abilities. I mean, we have technically 3 witches in the moment, with, if we're assuming that Agnes is Agatha, that's one witch, Scarlet Witch, and Wiccan has sorcerer type abilities. So again, all this magical power in one room can do a lot of magic. As we move forward, by far, I still think WandaVision, that's my favorite intro, but this was the funniest intro to me, as we get to, again, paying homage to Growing Pains and Family Matters and Full House. We get the intro and we see like the baby Elizabeth Olsen. We see, or I should say, Wanda as a baby. We see Vision as a child, which was just so funny and just hilarious. But if you also notice this montage as they're singing these songs along, these are all made up events as the song even wraps up, Cause We Got Love. But again, these are all just made up. This is just fake memories, a fake montage, a fake reality as Wanda is potentially making under someone else's control. Cut to what I predicted last week. This episode definitely kind of gives us Westview point of view, what's going on in this reality, this TV show, this sitcom in the 80s, but also what's going on outside and catching up with Sword and what's going on with Monica Rambeau. We see that she's getting examined, and she describes to Hayward that Wanda's voice was in her head and she has this feeling that kind of kept her down. So we all kind of thought, okay, was she under the influence? Was she under this hex? Was she a double agent? Was she just pretending to be under Wanda's vision? But no, she was controlled by Wanda. She kept hearing her voice in her head. But also something to note is she said that she felt like she was hopeless and drowning in grief. And then we get these quick shots between her and thinking about her mom, Marie, her, find out she died in the hospital. But we also get, if you guys rewatch the episode, there's a really quick shot of Wanda screaming and shedding a tear. We haven't seen, now she shed the tears, she was in the 70s, we saw that scene, but we also, I don't know if we've seen the scene when she's screaming out loud. I don't know if that's a connection to a future episode, foreshadowing, is that something that we witnessed from the past? Let me know your thoughts there, but it's interesting that she says she felt that she was drowning in grief, which makes me think about this whole thing being created by grief, and this is how Wanda's dealing with grief, right? And again, this just goes back to how some people don't really appreciate the comic book elements and why I love comics. They can fly, they can walk through walls, they can warp reality. But what I love about this show and just superheroes in general, but in particularly WandaVision, we're seeing a super-powered mutant, miracle child, how they deal with grief. She warps her own reality. In reality, if we had those abilities, wouldn't you want to bring back someone that you love that has passed away? Same goes with Vision. Would you want to be brought back to life after passing away? So I just love the connection. Again, they're superheroes in a fictional reality, but there's things that we can relate to in this show, and this is why I love this show, if I'm being honest. But as I digress, going back to Sword, they're now positioning, or I should say at least Hayward is positioning Wanda as a threat, as a potential terrorist. It's very interesting in this scene in particular. Just listen to the way that Hayward kind of talks in this scene as we get the official MCU kind of backstory on Wanda. Of course, we knew some of the stuff, but we learned her parents' name, Irina and Olaf, I believe his name was. Interesting that we didn't see a picture of them, which is a theory I talked about in our last stream about maybe, Magneto dropping, or Professor X dropping Wanda and Pedro off to another dimension, potentially. We'll talk about that later. But either way, we see again Hayward saying that they were, Wanda and her brother were, weaponized and were brainwashed to be Hydra agents. And it's interesting that Wu said, well, that's kind of like overblown situation. He looks at Wu, very interesting, because again, in this scene, Hayward's trying to position Wanda as a threat, as a villain. Again, as I mentioned in my review last week, I don't trust director Hayward. He can be a Hydra agent, an AIM agent, someone else entirely in regards to working to a secret society. Keep your eye on Hayward, ladies and gentlemen. Again, Hayward, I'm watching you. But either way, huge moment here. he shows this clip of a top secret footage that happened 9 days ago showing Wanda breaking into, as he calls, a secret sword headquarters. Secret sword, I don't know, Hydra, secret, AIM, again, Hydra, AIM, you name it. Hydra's still around somewhere, somehow. Either way, again, this secret mission. And again, this plays back to what I mentioned a couple weeks ago regarding the scrapped, deleted scene that was mentioned by Paul Bettany regarding that at the end of Endgame, there was going to be a scene showing Wanda dragging the dead body of Vision. I mentioned in my review a couple weeks ago that I would imagine they've scrapped that to put it in the show, and we kind of essentially get that in this moment here. Very interesting that we kind of get this moment in regards to permission to showing this. Again, it's very interesting that Hayward was able to show this top secret incident that goes on, positioning Wanda as the villain of the show. We see the actual footage pay out, and it's also something to note that this footage that we saw was actually in a clip of a trailer a couple weeks ago, but we get it from the camera's point of view. I would imagine that we're going to see that scene again later in this show, and we're going to probably see it in a much different perspective. What I'm thinking is, if this is SWORD, aka Hydra, aka AIM, they were experimenting on Vision, trying to make a superbot. I don't know. Ultron maybe is tied to this somehow, some way, and they were trying to bring back, because if you guys remember Age of Ultron, he created Vision to transmit his body into Vision to be this ultimate being, this ultimate robot. Keep that in mind. But as we move forward, again, another huge moment, as we see Agent Wu brings up, well, that's against the Sokovia Accords, I believe 36B, which was interesting to me because I always say, what is the Sokovia Accords in the world after Infinity War Endgame? Are they still intact? Have they just went away with that because there's people out of space that could just destroy the world? But no, the Sokovia Accords are still in place, which I think they're going to play more into that when we get shows like Falcon and Winter Soldier. But again, they say that in that particular section of the Sokovia Accords, it was against, like, I think it was Vision. He kind of wrote that in there because, again, he was on the side of having Sokovia Accords in Civil War. But also, I think that applies to the Avengers to not weaponize the Avengers, and particularly Vision not being weaponized. But again, it's very interesting because we hear them say in this scene, how was she able to bring him back without the Infinity Stone? Which brings me to a side note kind of theory here. I'm thinking that whoever is behind this, again, this can be SWORD, this can be, disguise as SWORD, Hydra, or AIM. I think they're trying to recreate the Infinity Stones in some way, in some manner, and obviously use that to their advantage, because we know Von Strucker was using the Mind Stone, was doing the experiment, the Miracle Program. I think this is their way to try to recreate some type of Infinity Stone by using Wanda, manipulating the situation. Something to keep in mind. We get a comic book reference as we see that the kids have now, I don't know if they created Sparky, which, by the way, Sparky is from the comics, the Vision run by Tom King. So really cool Easter egg, even though we don't get a lot of Sparky because, he dies at the later this episode. But again, I don't know if they created Sparky because in the comics he's an android dog, and obviously he's not an android in this show, but very interesting moment, a nice little Easter egg there. But moving forward, more of Vision calling out the strangeness of Agnes. She comes in with the doggy gear. Vision calls out, and we actually see Wanda use her powers in front of Agnes, and Vision's like, whoa, when did we start doing this? I thought we talked about disguising our abilities. And Wanda's just like, oh, it's fine, it's Agnes. She probably didn't even see it. She didn't even notice the babies went from babies to 5-year-olds, which is an important line because it makes it seem like Wanda and Agnes have maybe seen each other's powers behind the scenes working together without Vision knowing. And Vision says a nice little line here, we're always in the same mind, which, again, their connection speaks more to them just being romantically connected, but there is a physical, literally a connection between them both having the Mind Stone, which makes it sense that they're able to communicate with each other. We see when we get this moment of them yet again going from 5 years old, because they're like, oh, can we keep the dog? And Vision's like, yeah, you can get a dog when you're 10 years old. And we see them age up yet again. Who's in that scene? Agnes is in that scene when they age up. But also something to keep in mind, and this theory is potentially debunked, but a lot of people were thinking, okay, how is Evan Peters going to get into the show? Is he like the adult version of Speed? There's still some truth into them becoming older later on in the show or in future, Young Avengers stuff. But the fact that they can age up at their own power, we think that it's them or it's Agnes. But I think that we can debunk that the Quicksilver or let's just say Evan Peters is going to play Speed because he's the aged up version of him. I think we can put that to the side now because we find out who Evan Peters is playing, which we'll get to that a little bit later. But cut to Sword. Monica wants to go back into Westview. She mentions she wants to use Proton gear, which again, she's Captain Marvel, Proton, something to keep in mind. But she also mentions that she knows someone that will take on this challenge. Who is this someone that Monica was referring to? Is it her friend that she befriended in Captain Marvel that's a Skrull? Is it someone else entirely? Is it Solvik? Let me know who you all think Monica's going to bring into this situation. But it's also something to mention that Dorsey says that, are you scared to go back in? You might get your mind wiped again through this hexagon. Again, it's a hexagon because there's a hex going on with Wanda being a witch as well as Agatha. But I love this MCU Marvel discussion that they have amongst themselves regarding that Wanda's powers are even more unlimited than before, which kind of explains that they even acknowledge that Wanda is more stronger than she's ever been in the MCU, which I love that they acknowledge that. But they also go about the Wanda versus Thanos, which, as Monica says, well, if he didn't call for the Blitz, she would have took him out, which I don't know how they knew the play-by-play of what was going on in Endgame. I don't know if someone told them the story or whatever the case may be, or they had like a drone watching what was going on. But neither way we see, Jimmy Woo is like, well, Captain Marvel almost beat Thanos as well. And it's very interesting when he said Captain Marvel, we see Monica kind of be like, have like this look of disgust. I don't think she hates Captain Marvel, but I think there is something to be said that maybe Captain Marvel didn't come visit Marie when she had her cancer. So there might be some tension between those two characters, which I hope they address not only in this show, but of course in Captain Marvel 2. Moving forward, Monica proves that Wanda is rewriting reality, which they bring up that, if she's able to create these realities or these people become real, these objects become real in the hex, when they come out, do they become real into the reality, which I think we can assume that is the case, which may explain how Billy and Tommy, Wiccan and Speed come into the MCU, because if whatever happens in the end of the season, Westview is no longer a thing, they can come out of this and be a part of the Young Avengers. Cut to Vision at work. He's updating the computers and all that stuff, and they have this interference communications that come through with Sword. And again, he's just like, this is not right. And he even has Norm. He is able to go into Norm's mind and get him out of the hex. And we see Norm say, I need to check on my mom. Where's my phone? And he says, she's controlling my mind. She's in my head. Now, we are, the audience member, are assuming he's talking about Wanda, but I think Norm was talking about someone else. Mephisto, Agatha, Nightmare, you name it. I don't think he was referring to Wanda in that moment. Cut to the life lesson of the sitcoms of the 80s. We get the family forever lesson that Billy and Tommy had, discussion about being brothers. Sparky goes to the door. He barks at the door. He's scared. We see Wanda go out. It's Monica. She has a drone. She's trying to communicate. She's not able to communicate with her. We see the director say, okay, go ahead and shoot the missiles. Again, director is setting the stage. Very big moment here as Wanda breaches Westview. It's something to keep in mind in this moment, ladies and gentlemen, because as Wanda throws a drone to them, she has her accent back. I don't know if you all caught that. She wasn't talking the same way like she's talking in Westview, which makes me think, why does she have this accent? Was that Wanda, or was that someone else pretending to be Wanda in disguise and just taking on the accent of Wanda? Let me know your thoughts there, but I don't know if you all caught it. But again, she has her accent from what she had in Age of Ultron, but she's not talking that way in Westview. Monica tries to talk to Wanda and tries to get on her side and says, I'm an ally of you, and things of that nature. And we see Wanda's just like, I don't want to hear that. You're not going to take away the things I love, as they point all the guns at her and she puts her hex on them and points the gun. I love that moment when she points the gun at the detective or director Hayward as she goes back into the force field, and now the force field is even more powerful than before. Incredible moment. As we cut back to one of my favorite moments, the commercial of the week, as we go to Lagos commercial, which was the darkest commercial yet, because we see the same husband and wife that we've seen in all the commercials. I know there's a theory out there that might be actually Wanda's parents. We see them spilling the drinks, and you notice the color besides the beer spilling was red, which brings me to this being the darkest commercial, because red symbolizes blood, which, if you all don't remember, Lagos was what we were introduced to in Civil War, which Wanda accidentally killed the people in the buildings, which obviously set the stage for the Sokovia Accords. But also the tagline in this commercial is, Lagos, when you make a mess, you didn't mean to. So that is obviously a connection to the previous commercials, which is talking to the trauma and the past trauma that Wanda has went through, which again, she killed people accidentally coincidentally. But cut to Sparky eating the leaves. He dies again. He doesn't live that long. The boys start to cry. We see Wanda talking about sadness. You can't just avoid these moments, which is very weird that she's saying that because that's literally what she's doing. She's warping reality. She says you can't reverse death, which brings me to the point, and we see Agnes say, you can do that? Like Agnes plans, she doesn't know what Wanda's capable of, or maybe she doesn't, but it's very interesting that Wanda is saying this, you can't reverse death, because if you think about it, Wanda could technically bring back Vision because he's not a human, he doesn't have a soul, but it brings us to, we'll talk about not being able to bring back Pedro, her version of Pedro, because he has a soul, he's a human, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But it's funny that they're talking about bringing back people. Vision conveniently walks up during this time as they talk about bringing Sparky to life, which she doesn't ultimately end up doing. As we kind of wrap up the episode, Vision talks to Wanda about the conversation he had with Norm as she attempts to end the episode. I love when she tries to have the end credits, but Vision is refusing to let the credits roll. They have their kind of fight, their kind of discussion here, and Vision really wants to find out what's going on. He even screams at Wanda, and he asks what is outside of Westview, or Vision bringing up, why are there no kids in Westview, Wanda? And that's where Wanda kind of breaks down. She says, do you think I'm in control of all this? She doesn't even know how this all started. The doorbell rings, and it is Evan Peters as Quicksilver. Now, we'll get to the theories and all this stuff. He says to her, long last brother can't get a squeeze from his sister. Dorothy is watching this at the time. She says she recasted Pedro, and again, she can't reverse death. We get the end of the episode, so let's talk about that scene there. Again, we're assuming that this is Evan Peters playing Quicksilver from the X-Men universe. That's the assumption, right? But as far as my theories go, and then, let me know your theories in the comments. That could be our Evan Peters that we saw from X-Men Universe, which I love that X-Men version. If I'm being honest, I actually prefer that version of Quicksilver, even though, yes, he's had more screen time than Aaron Taylor Johnson, but I just like the way that they handled that character. That's like the one thing that I thought X-Men did a little bit better with Marvel characters that they kind of swapped. But either way, if this is the Evan Peters we know, just kind of theories, Mephisto, Agatha, Nightmare, they were able to pluck him out of his universe and bring him into this universe because you can't reverse death. If it is Wanda that's doing this, she can't bring back Pedro, but she's able to maybe pull another version of him from another universe, which it makes sense that he wouldn't, Quicksilver, Evan Peters would realize that because he's under the hex, he's under that, that spell that's going on. Or that isn't Evan Peters, that is Mephisto disguising himself as Evan Peters. That is Agatha, that is Nightmare. You name whoever the villain may be, put that in that spot there. But what a moment. Again, I don't know if this is the Luke Skywalker moment. Again, I don't even know when we have that moment. If, we're going to get a press release saying Elizabeth Olsen, that's the Luke Skywalker moment I was referring to. I don't know if that's the big moment, but it is no doubt a big moment that we didn't get Aaron Taylor Johnson. We got Evan Peters as Quicksilver again from the X-Men universe, which would make sense considering that they're technically, if Spider-Man rumors are to be true, Electro. This isn't Electro from Spider-Man 2, Amazing Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield. This is a different multiverse Electro. Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. This is a different Doc Ock from Tobey Maguire. So it would make sense that we're getting these different alternate versions from different realities coming into the MCU, being plucked out by Wanda, Mephisto, whoever the big bad is of this show. So that was an awesome episode. It could be a Skrull. That's another possibility there. I don't think it's a Skrull. It could be a Super Skrull because we know that there is a Secret Invasion show coming into the MCU on Disney+. But I thought this episode was fantastic. As I mentioned, I thought the acting was great. The big reveal of Quicksilver, the meta moments of the fight versus Thanos, the moment of Monica having some tension with Captain Marvel, setting the stage for Captain Marvel 2, and just all the little Easter eggs was just so much fun. Sparky making an appearance. And again, we're going to be breaking it down even more. Again, quick plug, tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central Time, myself, Amanda, Chris, Austin Burke, Ankit, and KB will be breaking it down even further. So tune in tomorrow to really geek out about this show. So I love this episode. I can't wait for episode 6, which I am to assume will be the Halloween episode that we saw in the trailer, which I can't wait to see what Halloween costumes people will be dressed in, their traditional costumes from the comics. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Make sure, as always, to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, your thoughts, your theories, your pros and cons. Have a discussion in the comment section. As always, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other content. Again, I'll see you all tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Time. Hope you all are staying safe, and we'll see you in the next video.